Well, good evening. Welcome to C3. We're so glad that you were able to join with us this evening. We are blessed this evening to have a special guest with us, and I will introduce her in a second. I just want to hit on a couple of the announcements that you saw, hopefully, as we were coming online. Don't forget, we are starting to open the church next week. So starting next Wednesday at 6 o'clock, you will be able to come to the church for communion. As you come in, you'll be able to just come to the front of the church. We will be there for you to receive communion. You could say a prayer and then kind of work your way right out through. So we want to invite you to take part of that. And also starting next week from 9 a.m. to 7 p.m., Monday through Friday, you'll be able to come in door number 15 and head into the Peeler Chapel and have an opportunity to sign in and pray and just be at one with God. And we want to invite you to take part of that as well, take part in that as well. And on August 23rd, which is a Sunday, we want to invite you to go to our website at christumc.net, and you can sign up for the Back to School Blessing. And there'll be three options, 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, and 8 o'clock. All three are going to be the exact same type of service. It'll be in the south parking lot, which is the parking lot that is right above Giant Eagle. And we will pray a special Back to School Blessing. We'll have some music. Even if you're not going back to school, we want to invite you to come and be supportive of those that are. And then we have a special gift for each age group. So if you're a kid, you'll get one thing. If you're a youth, you'll get something else. And if you're an adult, you'll get something else. So we want to invite you to come and be part of that as we pray for you all as you head back to school this year. Now, before I introduce Kathy, I just want to let you know that if you're watching on our website and you have the ability to jump onto Facebook, I want to encourage you to do so because we want to take questions tonight as we go through our interview. So if you have the ability to be on Facebook, jump onto Facebook and start sending your questions as we're going through the interview tonight, and we'll take as many questions as we possibly can. Now, with that being said, allow me to just say that as a pastor in the church has not done a very good job over the years, I don't think, of dealing with mental health and dealing with people's ability to function and do different things. We kind of leave that to other people. We don't really focus on that as a church. And with everything going on right now with COVID, with all the angst going on in the world in general, a lot of people are struggling in a lot of different areas. And we thought it would be good to take an opportunity here at C3 to address some of those issues. And Kathy Petchel, who is a member of our church, been a member since 1966, which is awesome. She is a clinical psychologist. She's also an associate professor of psychology at Washington and Jefferson. She's a founder of her own business, Baywood Consulting, and she cares for people on a regular basis. You've even led a mission trip to Greece to deal with refugees coming in as they were dealing with those kinds of things that come along with fleeing one place and going somewhere else. And she really does a great job of dealing with bipolar spectrum disorders and mood disorders and anxiety, and a lot of people are experiencing anxiety in the midst of this. So we are blessed for Kathy to come and join us tonight and just be willing to share your expertise as we discuss something that as a church we don't necessarily discuss a whole lot. So is there anything you want to share with us before we get started, just a little bit about you, your family?
Sure. Well, first I want to say, Chris, thank you for the kind introduction, and thank you for the awareness of recognizing that with COVID, even though we're riding a wave of a medical issue, that the mental health issue is such an important second wave, an important piece of this process. So I really appreciate your foresight in being able to have this be part of our discussion tonight, for sure. I want to just let you know that my family, my family is a wonderful mix. 4 adult children and one young man and his family came to our family 13 years ago. So I like to say I have 4 sons and a daughter, and they have taught me a great deal. Living with everything over the years and our ability to work together as a family has been such at the core of who I am. And I love the fact that I can be their mom, but at this time, as we're all adults, that we share some really good conversations, perceptions about events, including the COVID-19 right now, faith, many issues that really surface or come up. I also believe family is very important, but also service. And so a part of who I am and what I value is looking for particular ways that we can give back to others. And that piece has been an important part of who I am, and I've been very fortunate and grateful to have that connection.
Wonderful. So you've been in this church since 1966, so obviously faith is a big part of your life. Mm-hmm. How do you tie in your faith to what you do for a living?
Okay. Maybe a place to start would be looking at what faith means to me. And I think if we look at this kind of an overarching belief, I actually believe my faith allows me to think about the idea that everything's going to be okay. And in everything being okay, the piece, it's not that it's going to happen exactly how I want it to happen,
right,
and exactly when it's going to happen, but it's that belief that when it does happen, I'm going to be okay. Mm-hmm. Because I believe that the Lord is guiding this. And in guiding this, I believe that He will, how do I want to say this? He will make things okay. Mm-hmm. And in doing that, I believe in that.
Great.
I believe also that each of us brings kind of a unique perspective in terms of our own different contributions to our faithful experiences. So I think our faithful experiences, set a little bit of a frame for how we operate. For example, I would think that if we believe and understand that in God's world, we are all equal and we are all brothers and sisters, mm-hmm. there is this level of connectivity,
sure,
that we're all interconnected. And that really, for the most part, it really is not our job. It really is a part of who we are, that we help each other.
Yeah. That
we somehow are there for each other. And so I believe part of my faithful experiences come to this idea of gratitude and also the respect for all living creatures. Mm-hmm. And I think I operate from that and believe in that. So at the frame, I believe that for the most part, we're here for each other.
Sure, sure. Now, I mentioned in the introduction that you teach psychology, mm-hmm. and that you also have your own practice, and you've been seeing clients for a long time. Are you seeing any changes with what the needs of your clients are in
Sure.
the midst of COVID-19?
Yeah. It's been interesting to kind of reflect back and go back to mid-March, when it seemed like our world all of a sudden kind of shifted. Mm-hmm. And that we needed to do things differently, maybe a little more in terms of sheltering in place, a little more in terms of now I need to be virtual, where maybe I didn't really know too much about that before. Sure. And I have to learn a great deal. In that, I can remember the Friday that it happened, both my private practice and also school, everything was remote. Mm-hmm. And I will have to say, Chris, this probably isn't the strength in my wheelhouse. And so in many ways, it was kind of baptism by fire.
Sure.
I had to learn how to be there because, again, I wanted to do my best for both areas. What I had noticed was a number of things. When I reflect back, I think anxiety rose, I think because it's a stressful situation. It's unknown. And I think the other element of it is it's invisible.
Sure.
So it isn't that if I have somehow been in contact with someone that had it, there wouldn't be a little pink dot on my forehead that would say, stay away from Kathy Petchel. She's been in contact.
Sure.
So I think the idea of it being unknown, feeling somewhat isolated, has really raised worry, but also anxiety for people in terms of how do I keep not only myself safe, but how do I keep loved ones safe? And how do I continue doing what I need to do in a kind of a sense of safety and protection?
Sure.
So anxiety has definitely risen, and I think with this virus has also been the idea that we now are cleaning more. And in cleaning more, if that was a part of my pre-COVID makeup, or maybe I was a little obsessive or whatever, I might be doing this a little bit more because I believe I need to,
Sure.
given this new situation. So I've seen a recent poll, I was looking at some of the numbers, and a recent poll actually quantified that almost half of the adults in the United States have been negatively impacted by the virus. And so we're looking at numbers with mental health and substance use rising.
Sure.
And so individuals, if they had pre-existing mental health concerns, these are being potentially exacerbated, but also ones that maybe didn't feel anxious before have now become more anxious. I think the other piece, as we look at this, and it becomes a little more protracted. So it's one thing to say, okay, this is what we do in the spring, but come summer, we're going to be okay. And now we're into almost August, and we're still looking at this, and we're still making decisions about, is there face-to-face? Do we need to do things remotely? I think there's a sense of, it would be nice if this would end, if we could have an end in sight. And I think also part of the feeling I think a lot of people have expressed, or definitely clients, and I would say a number of people in having conversations with them, is that right now it's this idea, particularly if we're planners, we like to be able to plan. But right now, I don't know about you, Chris, do you feel you can plan?
Sure. I have about 4 plans for the same thing.
Same thing.
Yeah.
I always call it like plan one, step back, replan, and then, I'm not even 100% sure tasks are getting completed,
Sure.
because it's just a kind of a redo. So I know for me, one of the pieces that I find really valuable, and I'm really fortunate to really be pulling this from recovery process for some people, and that's the serenity prayer.
Okay.
And really looking at this idea of, accepting this idea, changing what we can, but then the wisdom to recognize the pieces that we can change or not change.
Sure.
And so for my clients that are working through recovery, we talk about this a great deal, about let's see what's possible right now, what we can do. Not only with anxiety, we're looking at depression.
Sure.
So I think with the isolation, each one of us is different and may have, a sense of how do I connect with others when it's so changed.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, and you mentioned, like with your clients, you're seeing an increase in anxiety.
Yeah.
You're seeing an increase in stress. You're seeing an increase in depression,
Right.
and how they cope with it. They're either coping with
Correct.
it in a healthy way, or they're trying to find some way to cope with it that may not be as healthy. I think all 3 of those areas are things that have become more prevalent in just everybody's life.
Right.
And we don't live in a society where it's like okay to just say, hey, I have a high level of anxiety, or my stress is way high, or I'm dealing with depression right now, because that's kind of like taboo. We don't want to talk about that. But I think if we're honest, we're all there somewhere.
Absolutely.
Even if it's just temporarily, we're all there somewhere.
Yeah.
And we all see it maybe in people.
Yep.
So for the people that we see it in, that maybe can't see it in themselves or don't want to admit it to themselves, is there something that we can do as their loved ones or as their friends to try to help bring some level of hope and joy and peace without making them feel worse about themselves by calling them out? You know what I mean?
Right. I think if we approach this from a standpoint of it's a we, that we are all in this together, no matter what. We are all experiencing some level. I know myself, at times where I'm like, for the most part, I have leadership roles for a state group and local groups, and I'm like, I need to be guiding, but I'm not quite sure what to do with this right now because we can't kind of do this. And so that would, for me, create some anxiety, and I would have to be like, I've got to figure out what to do with this. I think with loved ones, one of the pieces that we can do, and I know this is just such a simple question, but I think it's powerful, is to ask loved ones, are you okay?
Yeah.
Are you okay? And what that does is it just kind of opens it to be like, sort of, maybe not. And I believe that there's truly healing power in conversations.
Yeah.
And so we can, in that conversation, at least that person feels heard. And part of what we do together is possibly figure out what to do next.
Sure.
So, are you okay? That conversation starts, and say, I'm really sad that a lot of what I'm hearing right now is this sense of loss. That for the most part, I'm sad I couldn't do what I couldn't go on vacation like last year, or I can't do some things that I typically did last year at this time. And so there's this element of loss. And if we stay with that, it's going to make us sadder.
Sure.
And so I think what's important to say, we need to figure out in this moment, at this time, what can we do right now?
Sure.
And try to move them, not so much about tomorrow, because we don't know what tomorrow is going to be, because I'm going to tell you it's going to be different.
Mm-hmm.
But what can we do right this moment?
Right.
And I believe that when things happen, I do believe God is teaching us different things.
Mm-hmm.
The ultimate teacher, Kathy, be patient. You like to plan. You like to move ahead. No. Slow down.
Mm-hmm.
Be patient.
What was the one meme I saw on Facebook? It said, the one thing we all have in common is for anybody that answered the question in 2015, where do you see yourself in 5 years? Nobody got it right.
I did not put a pandemic.
Nobody got it right. Like, all the planners, nowhere close.
No,
right?
They did not foresee this
Yeah,
coming.
yeah, just coming from all, and you got to kind of look at it that way and just realize we got to do what we can do.
Yeah.
Again, don't forget, if you want to send a question, please send a question via Facebook. I got that pulled up right here. So I'm watching for questions so we can share that.
Yes.
Share those with Kathy. She'd be more than glad to answer those
Absolutely.
questions. You also mentioned about people feeling isolated and disconnected, like just because they can't get out, they can't do things. What advice would you give to us as to something we could say to them?
Okay.
Okay.
It makes me think about one of I co-chair an initiative down at Washington and Jefferson called the Health and Wellness Initiative. And part of what we were looking at is looking at many domains at W&J in terms of what health and wellness means. We radically had to shift gears and say what we typically would have unrolled this fall is going to be very different than what we had planned. So we shifted, and part of our campaign that we're looking at is called Connect Us. And in Connect Us, how can we thrive with relationships under current guidelines? So what we're working on would be looking at safe connections. And in many ways, what we need to be able to see is the fact that what can we do rather than what we can't do. I feel like in the last few months we've been operating under do not do.
Right.
And so one of my suggestions would be to shift that focus to, all right, maybe we're sheltering in place, or maybe we're staying here, or maybe we have our own pod of people that we feel comfortable with. What can we do with this? Mm-hmm. Well, I can go in nature. I can go for a walk. I know it's been really hot. I can go early for a walk.
Yeah.
I can go early for a walk. So really what I'm encouraging people to do is, rather than look at some of the can't do's,
Sure.
look at the can do's.
Okay.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and kind of look at that and say, okay, here's your situation. What do you feel comfortable doing? Mm-hmm. And really get them to be specific. And a lot of times, my next question is going to be, when are you going to do that?
Right.
Because if we just earmark it without anchoring it or slotting it somewhere, what happens is it just kind of goes away.
Sure.
Yeah?
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah.
Got a good question here.
Yay.
What advice do you have for caregivers who are no longer getting any kind of break from caring for loved ones? Whether it's parents caring for kids, trying to be teachers and parents, adults caring for aging parents. How do you take a break for your own mental health while caring for your loved ones 24/7?
Thank you so much for that loaded question. That was a wonderful question. Thank you so much, whoever sent that in. In fact, Pastor Chris and I were just talking about during a time period where we're feeling very overwhelmed, how do we take some time out for ourselves? So that's an excellent question. I think sometimes what happens is we just feel like we're spent. And a way of thinking about this would be, how do I fill up my well a little bit?
Sure.
So my thought would be each person is different. If I look to me, I love my people connections, but I think by nature, I tend to be a little more of an introvert because I refuel by quiet time. So for me, an important piece would be somewhere I need to fit that quiet time, either to read. I actually love to meditate. Just some that it can be quiet. Now, for you, it might be something different. Maybe you want to connect in a different way, but I think my answer to you would be reflect on who you are and see what fuels you. And that begins to let you know what it is you want to do, but also possibly where you can do that.
And I think it's important that what you hit on, even if it's just a little bit.
Absolutely. We would all love to say, like, take a week vacation. Well,
Right.
that might not happen,
Right. Right.
But where can I fit in a little bit of purposeful time in whatever way works for me? Now, you may be someone that says, I really want to have connection with my friends, or I want to have a conversation. So for you, it might be, where am I going to have that phone conversation or connection with someone else?
Sure.
Yeah.
And there's a variety of ways to do that.
Absolutely.
One of the ways I like to do that is playing golf. Like, I love to play golf even by myself because I'm just out there, just on my own.
Golf's very meditative.
There's some quiet time.
Yeah.
Kind of, it just gives me a little bit of time away. And I, even when you're golfing with other people, the people that I play with, none of us hit the ball to the same place. So you still get some alone time, even if you're with other people.
Still a quiet walk.
Right.
Ball.
You just have some time to maybe meditate or think or do those kinds of. Everybody's going to have something that's a little bit different.
That works a little bit different, but I think it's really important that you carve out, even if it's small. Maybe even for you, if it's like, I just want my morning cup of coffee in quiet for 10 minutes. Take it.
Sure.
Take
Sure.
it.
There's lots of important things to do that way. So people are dealing with all kinds of stuff right now.
Oh, I know.
And you've been a therapist long enough to know that there's this kind of, this attitude that goes along with seeing a therapist, like
a stigma,
like
kind
a
of?
stigma,
Like a
I
stigma?
shouldn't do that. When people are dealing with their everyday concerns and the stuff that's going on in their life, what are some things they can look for to say it might be time for them to see a therapist? You know what I mean? And know that it's okay.
Absolutely. No, I think that's a really good point. And I think a lot of times, I would love to say that the concept of stigma can be eradicated, that we could just say, this is something I do as part of my self-care. And maybe we put that under that umbrella. This is what I need. I need to have a third party that doesn't know me hear what I have to say and have a different perspective. And maybe that's the way you look at it. You look at it rather than, it's just, this is a way of getting some guidance.
Sure.
Some guidance. It's so interesting because I think if we were struggling with our faith, we wouldn't go, oh my goodness, I have to go talk to a pastor. What do you think? We would say, no, that's the natural thing that you do.
Yeah.
If you're struggling with your faith, then talk with someone of faith and have a conversation.
We have no problem going to talk to an expert on finances.
Correct.
Why won't we do
Yes.
it for our mental health or our
Yes.
spiritual health or
Yes.
anything else?
Yes, it's just this idea of I need to kind of check something out. I need to see, I need to feel better.
Sure.
And maybe that's the way we look at it is, I need to feel better.
Sure.
The other thing that might be helpful that I would suggest is that a lot of times we don't check in with ourselves. And what can happen is we might say like, oh, I had a couple days where maybe I was a little edgy or just felt like more fatigued. And so the World Health Association or organization, it's called WHO, actually has this 5-point check-in list. And it has to do with, am I feeling like myself? I would suggest look that up. Look at the WHO, the World Health Organization, and it's just a 5-point check-in list. And I would do that with ourselves. Do a check-in. If we had a sore back, we would go, note to self, okay, I've got that today, but I was lifting a lot today.
Right.
I'm going to check in with myself tomorrow on how my back's doing. We do that with our emotions and our feelings too.
Sure.
Check in with yourself. And if it feels like you could benefit or something might be going on, a lot of times people talk to their PCPs. I know for children that might be struggling, pediatricians are the gateway in terms of talking about information. And they have resources. Like I know pediatricians, I see children, I also see adults, and PCPs, and they will refer you to a number of names that they feel or they've had success from their other clients. So that's one way of kind of reaching out. They'll
Sure.
have resources for you too.
Sure.
Yeah.
It's funny you bring up children and teens. That's another question we got.
Oh, good.
What should we watch for with our teens? Are there signs that indicate a need to seek help in dealing with their mental health during
Okay.
this time?
No, that's a really good question. I think what I would look for, if we look at teenagers, and in this case, I'm looking at, say, around 13 to 18, and again, you can even split that group into half. What I would suggest is look for any behaviors that feel a little out of sorts for that child,
Okay.
for that individual. So think of it as a teenager having a baseline, like this is pretty much who they are. Either it's exacerbated, which might be concerning, or it's changing. And my thought would be, again, I'd come back to a very basic question. Are you okay?
Sure.
And see what they say and see where that conversation leads. A lot of times what happens, we know with teenagers, is there can be this natural tendency to isolate, and that's kind of what we're doing already. So sometimes it could be masked by COVID.
Sure.
So I think my best advice or suggestion to you would be take a look at the individual, the teenager's baseline, and then see if there's something different or exacerbated from that baseline.
Start there.
Yeah, start there and then kind of go from there. But definitely the conversation is a key piece.
Yeah. Almost, you want to say force yourself in, but don't be afraid to ask the question.
Yeah,
Don't be afraid of
absolutely.
them.
And I think for any of us, if we know it's coming from a position of love, we can hear it differently.
Sure.
And so I would say that too. If they know it's coming from caring and kindness, rather than something's not okay with you.
Yeah.
It's
What's
like,
wrong with
what's wrong with you?
It's like-
Come on, snap
Yeah.
out of it.
Yeah.
But if it comes from that caring and kindness, I think it's really good.
So overall, like in the midst of a pandemic, in the midst of what's going on with all the angst just in general, all the polarizing stuff that's going on in our world, all those kinds of things, is there any advice you would want to share with us on how to navigate it all?
Yeah, that's absolutely. I feel that on any given day, in any given moment, we are becoming bombarded by information. One of the pieces I find helpful for me is that I limit the amount of TV time I have and information. And I also want to hear from key sources. I want to hear from doctors. I want to hear from physicians, what they're finding, what they're seeing. And I want to hear what's being recommended right now. And I think for me, I want practical, evidence-based information. So I look for that. But at the same time, I also believe I don't want to be flooded by a lot of talk about it. You know, you want to hear about it, you want to be able to understand it and be able to do what's, appropriate, masking, 6-foot distance, doing cleanliness, etc. But I think at the same time, we want to make sure that we're limiting the amount of exposure we have to kind of 24/7 material that's coming across our ears. Mm-hmm. And I think the other piece of this is routine. I think if we can establish a routine, it anchors us and it grounds us in terms of our day-to-day. And so whatever works for you or whatever you find, and when I say a routine, not that the routine can't change, I don't mean that we have to stick to it so firmly, but I believe that I get up at a predictable time. This is kind of what I do in the morning. This is what happens. I think it does ground us in a time period where there's a lot of fluctuation and fluidity.
Sure. And that can also, just routine in and of itself could also be a form of self-care.
Right. Absolutely.
Just in and of itself.
Look at you. Look at you with it.
all about that self-care stuff, right? Like you got to fit it in wherever you can fit it in. Like
Well, but if we look at self-care, we also look at this as I'm taking care of me. And part of it is we think of it in so many ways, but one of the ways is I need to reflect on what works for me. And I need to begin to build that piece in, even during a time of change.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, Kathy, thank you so much for
absolutely.
Joining me tonight.
Thank you so much for inviting.
It's been super educational, super helpful. I know we got some questions that were answered, and hopefully it can be help for all of you, and be able to navigate as we go through COVID. We don't know how long this is going to last.
That's right.
We hope it ends soon. Back to those number of plans we have.
Absolutely.
It could keep going on for a while.
Right.
The door is open to have you back, and we'll talk about something maybe
I would love that
on another topic as well.
Yes, that'd be terrific.
But again, this is just an opportunity for us as a church to maybe share some information with you that might be helpful for you to navigate life in general, and to learn new information, and to get a devotion, and to stay connected. Those connection points, that's what this is. Christ Church Connection. That's the point of something like this. So I want to thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to come and join me. Let me close us in prayer, and then you can enjoy the rest of your night.
Can I add one more thing? Do you mind before the prayer? The one piece I wanted to mention, if there are any viewers that have any additional questions or any lingering questions, please don't feel just because we're done this evening that your questions are done. Please contact Pastor Chris. Let him know. He and I will be in communication, and I will be more than happy to help in any way.
That's awesome.
Okay.
So thank you. And you have my email, cmorgan@christumc.net. Send those questions, and we'll share them. Kathy's actually a neighbor of mine. So not only do we go to church together, but we live close by each other.
It's close.
So we see each other all the time. So make sure you get those questions in. So let's pray. Lord, we are grateful for Kathy. We're grateful for the work that you've called her to and the ministry that she has at a college campus and with her clients. We are grateful that she is such an active part and member of our church. And we are grateful that she took the time to be with us tonight. Help us to overcome the stigma of mental health and dealing with anxiety and stress and depression, and realize that it's okay to seek help or to ask questions in those areas, just like we do in other areas of our life. And as we check ourselves, we can continue to grow and become healthy and become who you want us to be. So help us to continue to do that and look for those signs in our loved ones, and not be afraid to ask the question, how are you doing? Continue to guide us in all that we do, and help us to be lights for you in this world. We ask all this in your Son's name. Amen.
Amen.
Have a great night. We'll see you on Friday morning at 8 for our next C3.